What we didn't know is that Jim, giving the opening keynote for the whole conference, said, "Oh, I'm going to give that keynote on the first person project." And he started out by saying, "And the reason this is a big deal is because we're having increasing trust issues with the open source supply chain." This is a link, and there's a QR code if you want to scan it, to the Wired article about the XE attack on the utilities, or a utility of the Linux kernel that came this close to being the worst backdoor in history if it hadn't been caught by a very assiduous Microsoft developer that noticed the funky behavior. This is just one of a number of examples of why Jim said, guess what? We need decentralized trust systems. And you might know that at the Linux Foundation, what was the Hyperledger project, which was all focused on blockchain for business, transformed itself about 18 months ago into LF Decentralized Trust, because there's more to it than just blockchains. And so Jim had challenged Decentralized Trust at their member summit the previous October. We need this. We need these solutions. And that's when we came to him, because First Person Project came out of 4 different Linux Foundation projects. We said, we think we've got an answer for you. What do you think? And he got really enthusiastic about it and said, yes, we need this answer. And, we can't implement it fast enough. And he then used some slides that we had provided to explain to the audience what are personhood credentials. I'll explain more about that. But in particular, why should we start with open source? Why should the Linux Foundation literally be customer number 1 of the First Person Project? And his answer was, because we have the problem and we have the developers and we have every open source project is a little trust community. That's the term we use for it. If you don't trust the other developers you're working with, how are you ever going to converge on the code base, and how is anyone else going to trust that code base? And he said a decentralized trust solution, like what we're going to talk about, supports these 2 key benefits of open source: permissionless entry and worldwide participation. So he's actually promoting this is not just a solution for the Linux kernel project or for all Linux projects, it's for all open source projects. He basically gave this keynote because these problems of the open source supply chain are an existential threat to open source everywhere, including everything you're doing at Kwaai. So that's how deep he thinks it goes.